Hi guys, welcome to today's video. In this video I'm going to be going through how I made my recent doll. So it's a little tiny petite doll this time. It is a sand Selix. So it will be up for grabs. My patrons get first dibs on any new work that I have. So if she is still available, you can head to my shop at creaturesofnat.com and you can find her there. Payment plans are also welcome. And yeah, so if you want to see how I made her, then just keep watching. Okay, so we're starting off with my usual way, which is casting a resin piece. So this one I had sitting around for quite a while, and I thought it was time to actually make another Selix. So I got all the pieces together and started painting them up with a just a water-based acrylic paint, and it doesn't have to be anything special. It can be anything from your local craft store. And for the Selix, I always envisioned it to have just solid black eyes, so like pupilless eyes. So I'm painting the whole eye area in black, as well as the nose and the mouth. And the nose is sort of like a goat nose, and the eyes are sort of like deer eyes, and the head is sort of deer-like, but it has these long ears. So it's just something I just sculpted and then yeah, just cast. So nothing in particular that came to mind. I just wanted to make something like this. Moving on to the paws, or the hooves I mean, and a good technique this way is to stick them on a piece of something, but I'll make a separate video or a post for my Patreons on my Patreon about this technique, and that way, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, but if you want more detail, you can probably find it on my Patreon in the future. But it just helps you paint your smaller pieces that you can't quite hold. And I'm just using the same black paint as well, and it is from the brand Chromacryl. And I did a couple of layers of paint with this one just because I wanted a nice smooth coverage, and I did another coat of paint once everything had been stuck together, and then I let this dry overnight to make sure it is properly dry. Moving on to the fur, and I just recently got this faux fur, and it's got like it's kind of like a creamy beige colour with white patterns on it. I might make another doll. I'm thinking of a cat with these patterns, but I thought I'd give it a go on a Selix. So the previous Selix was a sort of silvery brown, if that makes sense, with a black undertone. So I wanted to do something a little bit opposite but the same sort of tone. So what I done is drawn out patterns for this and cut it out. So this is a fur. You can get a better look at what it is. So it's like a shortish pile fur, and it's perfect for this doll because this doll is quite small, and that way the fur is not too like fluffy, and the pile underneath isn't too thick. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut out all of the body shapes using a small pair of sharp scissors, and I'm gonna go into detail on another Patreon post why I prefer to use small scissors as well, and like what else you can use. So once I've cut all these out, I will then pin them first side together, and then I prefer to sew it up on a sewing machine. I just like the easiness of a sewing machine and the durability. So once that's all done, this is what we have so far. So with this doll, because it's quite small, I have to leave a lot more area open so I can flip it the right way around. So that means a lot more hand sewing, but that's fine. So I left the back end open. I left a significant amount of space around the legs, and also I left the neck area open. So I'm going to flip it right way around, and because I've left it open, it's pretty easy to flip around. I just have to sort of coax it through and make sure I don't rip any of the seams or anything, but you can always give it a little prod with something that's blunt. I prefer to use a wooden tool because I find that using a steel tool means you have more chance of sort of ripping the fabric or breaking the seam or something. So find like a blunt wooden thing, like a wooden end of a wooden spoon or something, but I just have a clay tool that has a round end on it. So this is what we have once it's all flipped the right way around. And And this doll is going to have a ball and socket armature, so it's going to have a small, I have a tiny size one. I forgot exactly what size it is, but it's tiny size and it works perfectly for this doll. So I'm going to go ahead and insert that. And this is the whole armature is for the spine, and then the legs are going to be wire because the hooves are quite thin and don't really work for the ball and socket armature. So once that's all connected, go ahead and sew all of the loose ends up using a ladder stitch, and I sort of do some fur sculpting while I'm sewing it up to make sure I can get all of the smaller sizes together, and then I can go ahead and attach the fur to the neck. I like to do this first just so it has like a solid base. And I'll leave this to dry overnight, and then I'll go ahead and fill the body with polyfill. So if you don't know what polyfill is, I have a video on my channel that you can check out about what I stuff my dolls with. So if you're curious about that, you can head in my Materials 101 playlist. So the same deal with the legs, go ahead and sew it all up. If you're wanting to know a wire armature tutorial, I have that in my shop and how I attach everything. It's in my shop and at creaturesofnat.com, and it comes in a zip folder with a PDF and a video tutorial. So if you wanted to know how, you can just head there. And so with all of my dolls that I make, it has a little story. So this little Selix has a story that I can read now. Sand Selixes are a very ancient creature. They are otherworldly looking and are said to outdate humankind. They have long legs to help navigate through the sand and large tube-like ears to protect them from the sand. They generally spend their day in one spot and are often mistaken for statues. They have a relatively light coloured coat, mostly in sand colours, and some patterning in darker browns and yellows. Each Selix's patterns on their coats are individual and not one is ever the same. Sand Selixes can be found primarily in the tribal deserts in the tribal lands of Krai, India. So that's a little story of Sand Selixes. So I have moved my blog posts over to my Patreons, so that way my patrons can have access to that, and it is for all tiers. So if you're interested in that, then head over there and take a look. So anyway, moving on again, and now that I've sewn all of the ends up, I can go ahead and attach the faux fur to the resin again using a tacky fabric glue. I like to use tacky fabric glue. I think it's the best thing that holds fur to resin, but yeah, you can use anything that you think works for you. So here's a little shot of what it looks like before I've trimmed everything up, and once I've glued everything as well. So I'm going to go and give it a trim, and then I'll come back and show you what it looks like. So here's what we've got after it's all trimmed. I left a little bit of pile on the back of the legs just because I like that look, and I trimmed the top of the tail as well and most of the body, and left the neck fluffy. So I went ahead and added all of the fur to the face, and I sort of just, I don't know, I didn't have a plan for this, so I just winged it, and this is what came out, and I think it works really well. So I'm just going to go and clean up all of the eye area and just do some more detailing with some paint. It's usually around the eyes and the nose and mouth, obviously, because it sort of gets covered by the fur that you attach. And then add any little patterns that I think works for the Selix. And I'm adding just a little bit of black colouring into the rest of the mane so it blends in a little more. And then I had an idea that I wanted to add a colour to it, so I got this, it's called skin tone, but it's totally not skin tone, but it's like a skin tone base, I guess, and it's kind of a pastel-y kind of orange colour. And I'm just adding that to underneath the eyes, and I think I really liked the way that turned out. It added a little bit more depth and character to the face. So I probably like to do that a bit more in my dolls, because a lot of my BJD dolls have sort of eye masks and stuff on them, so I'd really like to do that a little bit more in the future. So here we have him all finished, and if you would like to purchase him or her, you can head to my shop at creaturesofnat.com. My Patreon My patrons have first preference over any dolls that are for sale, so just keep that in mind in the future. So that is it for me today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. You can also check me out on Instagram and Facebook at Creatures of Nat, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.